filming a video. You can be in it, but you can't talk. Yeah, no barking, okay? I mean, it's also no licking. I'm sorry. Is that a deal breaker for you? Hello everyone, my name is Caitlin, and I'm going to be talking about some books that I read recently. So just forewarning you, if you're hearing snoring sounds or oinking sounds, I do have a furry pig masquerading as a dog that is laying down here next to me. So that's what those sounds are. It's not my stomach or something in the background. It's just him. So the first book that I read was Saloons and Stardust by Pamela Jeffs. This was published in 2019, and I believe this is an Australian author. This is a collection of science fiction fantasy short stories, and I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I didn't stop reading it, which I thought about doing a couple of times. The first story is definitely the strongest, and I don't think there are any stories beyond that are stronger than the first. And I think when that happens in a short story collection, it definitely dims your experience of the book. I think I would rather finish strong than start strong and then continue to be disappointed throughout. But that's just personal preference. Not to say these other stories were bad, but they felt more like concepts that weren't fully developed. They felt like ideas. And I thought those ideas were very creative and interesting. They just didn't feel complete enough to me. The other thing that I didn't like was that the dialogue is terrible at times, and the interaction between the characters is terrible at times. It just sometimes is very cliche, and I didn't like that. It took me out of the reading experience. And so when I think fantasy or sci-fi takes you out of the reading experience for some reason, it just makes the experience of the book that much worse because it's a science fiction or fantastical world. So you really need to buy into that belief to be able to really enjoy it. But I'm still glad I read it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, which I feel like is a little bit generous, but if I had given it a 2 out of 5 stars, I felt like it would have been too harsh. So maybe it's like a 2.5. I don't know. Whatever that means anyways, because as I've talked about on this channel before, star ratings just get really arbitrary after a while. So for what it's worth, 2.5, 3 stars. The next book that I read was Where the Line Bleeds by Jesmyn Ward. So Jesmyn Ward is an author that I've talked about a lot on this channel because I love her writing so much. This is part of her Bois Sauvage trilogy. I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, so my French is not good. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly at all. But it's about a town, Bois Sauvage, in Mississippi, where each of her 3 books in that series take place. I think this one was published first or second. I can't remember which, but it was published in 2008. And it has a lot of the same themes as the other books do. Family, strong familial ties, and a lot of complicated emotions within those family relationships. And her books always seem to break your heart in some way. And this is no exception. Although I will say that the emotional impact of this book was less for me than the other 2 books that I've read by her. I think one of the reasons for that is because the narrative in this book is a lot more traditional than her other 2 books. Not that her other 2 books are experimental, but just the narrative in this one feels more standard, like what I might read in any book that I picked up and read. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense. It feels denser and it took me a little while to get through. With Salvage the Bones, that one was really gritty and dark, and it really pulls you in, and it's brutal, and it forces you to continue on with the story, even though you know these horrible things are going to happen and you don't want them to happen. And then Sing Unburied Sing is this like half ghost story journey in a car, sort of magical narrative that comes really easily and reads really easily, and you just fly through it. So, and it's really beautifully written as well. All of her books are, but that one I think especially so. So this one felt very different from those two, but all of her books feel very different from each other, and yet at the same time are very distinctly Jesmond Ward. And once you've read them, you'll know what I'm talking about, even if I can't articulate it very well. So this one is about twin brothers, fraternal twins, and something that causes them to have some conflict between the two of them, even though they've been very close their whole lives. And they have a very close relationship with their grandmother, who takes care of them. Their mother sort of abandoned them, but is still in and out of their lives at times. And they also have a father who is kind of a side character, but also plays a big part in the story as well. So there are a lot of complicated emotions and family relationships, and beautifully written, just not my favorite of the three. I would say if you've never read Jesmond Ward before, start with this one, because I think if you like this one, and if you want to read more, it's only going to get better as you read through that trilogy. And it doesn't matter which one you read first, honestly, in terms of the timeline, because characters are mentioned in the other books, but it doesn't even matter because they're just on the sidelines, and it doesn't matter what order you read them in terms of the timeline. So go ahead and read this one first. And I think that if you like it, you'll definitely love her other ones. So I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Zuzu Maki by Junji Ito. I don't know how to say that either. This is some of the art. I think this was first published in English in 2002. And this is a guy that has a lot of other stuff out there. This is the first manga that I've read by him. And I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, and I expected to really love it, and that kind of disappointed me. I loved the creativity. I loved the artwork. It gets really freaky and weird and disturbing and creepy. And while those things didn't jump out at me at first, as the story progresses, it gets creepier and creepier, and ends up feeling like a little bit like Lovecraft to me. So I enjoyed that. The thing that really annoyed me about it is that it had so much potential to be better. And it could have been a lot better if he had just developed some freaking characters. There was a character in here, the main character, who I know nothing about. I finished this. I read this. I know nothing about her. She had a boyfriend. She went to high school. She had a mom and a dad and a brother. That's all you ever really know about her. Oh, and she's nice. She's not mean to people. And she does have to be rescued by her boyfriend pretty frequently. Yeah, that really annoyed me because I felt like if her character had been developed at all, then it would have made this book so good. But just totally missed the mark on that. And also the chapters in here, which I know were published individually before they were bound up in this deluxe edition. Each manga, I guess you would call it, but I'll call them chapters. Each chapter was really episodic. So what happened in one episode didn't seem to have any impact on the next episode. And that really bothered me as well. Now, as you get further along, like the last third of the book, you start to feel the impact of everything and the overarching story develops. But at first, there are all these things happening in this town that just make you scratch your head because nobody's talking about it and nobody's doing anything about it. They don't happen realistically. And I know that none of these things would happen because it's a fake story about spirals, but you expect there to be consequences in a story. Like, for instance, there's a hospital scene where you think, well, that hospital is closed forever. But then they never talk about it again. Like, wouldn't the townspeople be talking about the fact that something horrific happened at the hospital and that, you know, you probably shouldn't go in there? I don't know. It was just weird like that. But overall, I enjoyed it because of the creativity, because of the art, and because of the idea of it. I really liked the concept. And I think the art carried it for me. So I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. I would suggest it if you like manga. It's not something that's hard to get through. I mean, it's thick, but it's a manga. It's not hard to read, and it doesn't take a long time. So for the art and the idea of it, I would say read it. I don't know if I'll read anything else from him, but if I do and I encounter the same problems with characters and overarching stories, I'm definitely not going to read anymore. We'll see. So the last book that I read was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This book did not disappoint me. I loved it. There's so much hype on BookTube about this book, and there's a reason for that. It's so well written. The world building, the character development, the relationships between characters, the politics, the way that the narratives all weave together. The narratives are all coming from different parts of the planet that this takes place on, the globe, I guess you would say. And they're, you know, these like silos that end up merging and creating this overarching story that's just great. I loved it. That's steeped in myth, and they're dragons, and the female characters are so strong and kick-ass. I love this book, if I haven't mentioned that yet. Yeah. There was one character that I didn't sympathize, that I think I was supposed to sympathize with. However, I was still really interested in his story, even though I wanted him to die and for bad things to happen to him, because I get really vindictive like that when it's a fantasy world and it's not real people. Like, I like bad things to happen to characters that I don't like. But even though I hated him and I don't think I was supposed to, I still was really interested in his parts of the story. So that was fine. And I really liked all the women in this story. Even the women that weren't the main characters were just like side characters. They were all really great and well developed too. Yeah. So the one thing that I'll say about this is that she takes so much time developing the story and developing the characters and the politics and bringing it all together. The last 1/3 of the book is really rushed. So the pace was way off in the last third, to the point that I wasn't sure if there would be a second book or not. Like, I thought when I was starting this book that when I was like halfway through, I thought for sure that there would be a second book. And now I know, or I guess I haven't looked to see if there is a second book or not in this world. But this story is one story. There's, you know, it's resolved within this one story. the main conflict. So that threw me off, where I was like, how is she going to wrap all of this up within this one book? Because of the pace, which was glorious. It was great. I didn't mind this pace at all. It felt like it went really quickly, even though it's a huge book. And the character development was great. But when she started speeding things up, I was like, what? Wait, slow down. It's okay. I can read a second book. I don't mind. But apparently I don't need to. And that's the only negative that I would say, is that the pacing is off in the last third of the book. But it still had a really satisfying ending. I'm still going to read everything else that Samantha Shannon has written, because I've never read her before, and now I really want to. And I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It's probably more like a 4.5, but again, with the star rating, who cares? Really good book. If you like fantasy, read this. Yeah, so that's everything that I read. Let me know if you've read any of these, or if you're thinking about reading any of these. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.